Fort Worth played a key role in World War I and actually changed the face of modern warfare. The Canadians were leading the way in aviation, and their Royal Flying Corps were a vital part of the fighting force of the war. For the first time in history, battles were not only fought on land and sea, they were being fought and won in the air. But the weather in Canada made it impossible for the Royal Flying Corps to train pilots there. The answer to that problem was Fort Worth. Texas weather in the developed land of the Arlington Heights neighborhood made the perfect setting for training pilots. By August of 1917, the Fort Worth area was booming with growth in population and economic development. 3 training airfields were established near Fort Worth. Tolliver 1, also known as Higgs, you guys can come up if you want to see it. Tolliver 2, which is also known as Barron Field, just off Everman Parkway, and Tolliver 3, which is in Carruthers, near Benbrook. One of the main men given the charge to train these pilots was Captain Vernon Castle of the Royal Flying Corps. Vernon and his wife Irene were not just members of the military community. They were known internationally as professional ballroom dancers. They made their home in Benbrook, where they were very popular.
Sadly, Vernon was killed when flying near Carruthers Airfield. He was already a celebrated war pilot and had shot down many Germans before coming to Fort Worth to train young soldiers to be pilots. But in February 1918, he had to make dramatic maneuvers in his plane to avoid hitting a young pilot in training. Castle's plane crashed and he was killed. But he was so loved by the people of Fort Worth that thousands of people came to see his funeral procession, and his crash site near the corner of Vernon Castle Avenue in Benbrook still has a memorial to him that was erected in 1966. After his death, Vernon's wife and dance partner Irene wrote a book as a tribute to him. It was called My Husband, and in it she shared personal stories and letters from her beloved husband.
It seemed inconceivable to most that a dancer, a professional dancer, a man on the stage could be a fighter. He was not a fighter in the sense that he liked war. He was not a soldier of adventure nor any other kind. He hated discipline and the barracks, and he loved above all other services the theater, restaurants, cafes, and any other place of amusement, and all that he gave up gladly because his country was at war. His letter from the Aviation Field de France are quite full of unusual bits of observation up front, like the one from the Field de France.
Once the men realized I was Vernon Castle, the officers made me teach them the foxtrot. And now every evening they have dances and dance with one another. At any other time, it would have been strange to see 2 men dance with each other. But when you know that each and every one of them face death pretty nearly every day, it doesn't seem at all weird that they should dance. And they welcomed me as a godsend. There's a gramophone here playing all of the Watch Your Step music, and it makes me awfully homesick. There's an awful row now going on. The continual thunder of guns on the outside and the even more frightful sound of the officers on the inside, it would all make an Indian uprising sound like real music.
Irene wrote the following little prayer for him. He wore it around his neck with the duty little string for the next 9 months. Almighty God, if you are there, listen to my humble prayer and keep him safe. Keep him in your care and always watch him through the weary days. Make him feel my love and sorrow and bring him back some near tomorrow and keep him safe.
With the 84th Royal Flying Corps Squadron, Vernon went back to Benbrook, where his work as an instructor of pilots continued. He knew no fear, and his men knew that he would not ask them to do something that he would not gladly do himself. His stunt work was the admiration of everyone at Camp Benbrook. On that day in February, Vernon had to make the split-second decision to make a death-defying maneuver in air to avoid colliding with a young pilot in training who made a mistake in his plane.
Those who witnessed it felt certain that Vernon knew his maneuver couldn't be successful, but he did it to save the young pilot. In any event, he crashed nose downward, and Vernon was killed.
May 14th, 1916, France. I received your sweet letter this morning. Your prayer was too adorably sweet. I'm going to tie a string around it and wear it around my neck until after the war. God will surely listen to a pretty prayer.
Yet how it only seemed yesterday that he was here, smiled and talked of war as children do. But with the 10 soldiers play and how he had to think you gone forevermore. You are quite still and laugh no more. Those lips that loved well are mute today. And so the lights are dim and the dance is over. The more hush, the laughter drops away.
Thank you guys, and enjoy the rest of the exhibit.
Thank you.
Saying that got me bad. You know, I've passed near 30 women in these white dresses, and they all looked at me crazy. I didn't think anyone was going to help. I'm Patrick Boris of Camp Bowie, but you can call me Pat. I'm just glad I got the chance to be a part of this. They took me out of my shell hole where there are more wounded soldiers. They were white. I was woken by French troops to get in line and fight while the white men were left to rest. They didn't care that I was hurt. I was a piece of meat thrown in to be ripped apart. But I'm from Texas, Fort Worth, Texas. Only one other colored man outside my unit even got to fight. Everybody else, my brothers, my neighbors, they're all at their own camp not doing nothing, feeling helpless, and I got to fight. I killed some men. We just want to help. I don't know why we're treated like we're useless. I'm from Texas and I'm proud, and I want to do my part in this war. My brother plays in a jazz band back home for soldiers stationed at Camp Bowie. I don't want to play music for the white man. I'm going to stand next to him and fight alongside him. That's why everyone ignored me in my cut. Nobody wants me here. I know. I just want to fight. I want to make my family proud. The men in my unit are good soldiers, strong and brave. We may not have been trained like the white man back home at Camp Bowie, and we may not have been given the best weapons or rations like the other guys, but we don't quit. We don't back down from the enemy, and we don't need big parades with marching bands to cheer for us in our foxholes. We do our jobs. We are Americans too.
My name is Ruth Frazier. My father was a patriotic Native American soldier in World War I. His name was Tobias William Frazier. He was born in Indian Territory on August 7, 1892, to Reason and Susan Payne Frazier. He helped volunteer and defend our country on May 19, 1917, and was deployed to Camp Bowie near Fort Worth, Texas. He was combined with the Texas National Guard and became 36th Division. My father would tell me how their training was very primitive. They used sticks like these to stimulate their rifles. He sailed to France July 18, 1918. He would tell me about his trip from Texas to the East Coast. He would tell me how big everything was and how the view from the train was breathtaking. He never talked about how long the trip was, but what he did talk about was how the general took months to start an offensive attack. Near St. Etienne, the Germans held fast when the 2nd Division entered the fray. The 36th Division was called in, and the Choctaw language was used as the code. My father told me how he received a flesh wound on his leg. He told me that his buddy shot the sniper away when they heard the shot. I asked him if it hurt, and he said football was worse. And that is why Native Americans are so important to World War I, and why I am so proud of my father who bravely served our people as Choctaw and Americans.
When the United States entered the war, it impacted everyone in our society. Everyone wanted to do their part, but some people found it difficult to find their place in the war effort. In Fort Worth, in Camp Bowie, Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, and Jews enlisted, prepared to fight beside the white soldier. Sadly, they weren't all treated the same by the U.S. military. In Camp Bowie, black soldiers were segregated into all black units commanded by white officers. They weren't allowed to train like the other men, who were taught to handle hand-to-hand combat, weapon usage, and even to pilot planes for the quickly growing aviation units. In Fort Travis and San Antonio, African Americans were treated like the other men and were trained for all aspects of combat. Imagine the pain these dedicated soldiers must have felt when they marched a grand parade through downtown Fort Worth to honor the brave men heading to Europe, and they were forced to stand and watch from the sidelines. Many Native Americans were also segregated into special units, but they were given combat training. One of the Native American units were invaluable to the war effort when they became code talkers, using their native Choctaw language to communicate important information behind enemy lines so that it could not be intercepted and understood by German forces.
One of the boys from my hometown, the others I did not know. I helped bury boys from Company A, B, C, D, E, F. I was in headquarters, 141st Infantry. You asked for particulars. I will do my best to tell you all I know. One of the boys had the top of his head blown off, or rather blown loose from his eyes to the back of his head and left hanging there. He had a coarse album hair with a freckled face. His left side was blown away. Another Bailey boy had one bullet through his head. I cannot describe his features for his face and head was covered in dirt. A third Bailey boy was almost blown in two. He was hit in the stomach. I think his hair was lightly colored. The fourth Bailey boy was a Jacksboro boy. I don't remember the others giving names, but Earl Bailey sounds familiar. It was the chaplain who took personal effects of the boys and was supposed to send them out to their relatives. I don't know his name or address, but we'll let you know as soon as possible. Some of the boys laid out in no man's land for several days and nights before we could bury them, and they were robbed of their personal effects by the Germans. We found a number of them with only the identification tag, my cousin among them. We buried from 17 to 57 in each grave. The graves were 6 foot wide and 4 foot deep, and long enough for the boys to lay side by side on their backs. They're buried near St. Anthony, France. I'm sorry I cannot give you more defined information, but I'll write to you again to find more about the chaplain. If you need anything more, I'm sure glad to know it. Sincerely yours, James A. Dixon, Jacksboro, Texas.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row. That mark our place in the sky, the lark still bravely singing. Fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn.
Saw sunset glow, loved and were loved.
And now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep.
Though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Cheryl Penland, and I am the theater director at Trimble Tech High School. And these are my students that you saw performing today. What school are y'all from? McLean.